Welcome back to First Light. I'm your host, Chris Keller. Today I welcome Bill Biggs, the executive director of Garces, Grabler, and LeBrock, one of the largest personal injury firms in New Jersey. Bill has become a leading voice on what he calls culture by design. He believes that when you love your people and demand high performance, you create not just successful businesses, but enduring legacies. We're going to talk to him about leadership, building culture, having the hard conversations, and how law firms, and really any business, can be places of purpose and transformation. Let's get into it. I'm thrilled to welcome Bill Biggs as my guest today on First Light. Got to know Bill through masterminds, and his background is unique. So, for those who may not know you, Bill, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, and how you got there?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. There's 53 years behind all that. Um, yeah, Bill Biggs. Right now, I am the executive director at Garces Grabler LeBrock. We like to call it GGL. It's the largest PI firm in New Jersey, and we do PI, workers' comp, and um, we're growing like crazy. And that's what I love. That's what I love to do. That's what I love to see happen. PI firms, working in PI firms, in leadership, putting teams together, uh, using data driven systems to make them as high performing as possible is what I've devoted my professional life to. And so I also, for years, have done consulting in one way or another in that context with PI firms. Focusing first, for me, growth always starts with the team and putting the right team together. At heart, I think I'm probably a coach. And so it took me a long time to figure out exactly, what I wanted to be when I grew up, even though I kept doing similar everything I'd found myself doing professionally seemed to have some similar components to it. And then one day I just realized I'm a coach. That's what, uh, uh, you know, and so all along, coaching Pee Wee football with my boys when they were little, that, I should have realized then that was my calling. But no, what it all boils down to is if you love competing, you love seeing people that are put into your care reach their highest potential, choosing the right people, right? That's 80% of it right there. And then putting them together in the right way, putting systems and processes in place for them to use, and then empowering them to go out and win.
Well, let me ask you,
That's
what drew you into the legal industry? What was kind of the turning point that made you jump into the legal industry?
Yeah, crazy story. I never expected it, wasn't looking for it, didn't seek it out. About 15 years ago, I'd been a pastor for 10 years, working primarily with college students. So again, coaching, common cause, individuals reaching their potential. It all kind of, there's these themes, these threads. And a guy that I was in a men's book study with, a weekly men's book study, I'd known him for years. But didn't really know what he did professionally. I knew that he worked at a law firm, didn't know much about what he did there. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you know anybody who's interested in being a director of operations at the time for a PI firm in town?" And I said, "What's a PI firm?" And long story short, I was no longer a pastor at the time. I had started some businesses and in media, and they were doing really well. But um, what I didn't realize, he was asking for recommendations if I knew anybody. And after about the third time of him asking me that question, finally he said, "Hey man, don't you get it? We'd like to talk to you." And so I said, "Oh, okay." And so I went down. I met with these guys for over the course of 2 or 3 months, and they wanted someone from a non-legal background, a non-lawyer, to come in, someone with a organizational leadership background, working with teams, working with culture, to come in and help build their firm. And it took me a while. It took months and months of us meeting because I wanted to understand the industry. I wanted to understand, what is PI law all about, and is this something I can give myself to? And I still had these other businesses on the side, so I needed to understand if they were okay with that. Long story short, um, At the time, there were about 22 people on that team, and we were at about 2.2 million in revenue. And in about 7 or 8 years, we grew to about 125 people and over 30 million in revenue. And to me, that, I mean, we were just doing what we were doing. I didn't understand that. I'd gotten involved with a lot of groups, and we were fortunate to be connected to best practices, firms that were doing best practices. But over time, I realized that what was happening was uncommon in the industry. We didn't have any huge cases that hit. It didn't. Those things didn't happen because of outliers. Those things happened because we built the right team. We chose the right people. We trained them. We empowered them. We made smart decisions. We hung out with people smarter than we were. We learned, as my friend Tim Mackey says, from other people's bloody noses. And before I knew it, I was a COO and being asked to speak at conferences to talk about how we did it, then asked to do consulting. And 15 years later, you know, I have the best life in the world.
Well, there's so much to unpack there,
Yeah,
but
I know, right?
where
It's
where I
crazy.
want to take, because I do want to talk a lot about culture, and you and I recently got to be on a stage together up in Detroit, where we got to talk about culture, and it's amazing. But what one thing I wanted to hit on right now, just because you said it, is that you kind of took bloody noses from, learned from other people's bloody noses, and
Yeah.
so one thing I know that you recently started is you're the president of the Fireproof Masterminds. And
Hmm.
so, can you talk about kind of the power mastermind groups and surrounding yourself in those kind of communities where you do learn from those people who've taken the bloody nose already,
Right.
and how important that it's been for you and building and scaling a firm.
Yeah, I say without reservation. I said this before I ever had any interest in a mastermind program, meaning being in leadership where I would benefit from it, as like my wife likes to say, my 14th job at a time, not in a row, but at a time. Um, I used to tell people, look, the firms I've been a part of, the firms that I've seen that have grown the fastest and the most healthy are firms that are meeting with other firms to find out what are they doing. Like-minded people, highly driven, growth oriented, committed to one another, trust environment, and there's probably now, yeah, 12, 15 years ago, there was one or two programs that were even similar to what we now call a mastermind. And now there's probably 8 or 10 programs out there in the industry. But fundamentally, I think it's one of the most important things that any firm will ever do if they really want to grow, because it's a shortcut. And of course, in the big picture, there aren't really shortcuts, but it's the fastest route because you make fewer mistakes. And you make fewer mistakes because you hear what other people did. So it's people gathering together, high intensity firm owners and executives in a trusting environment, in a group not too big, not too small, 6 to 10, 6 to 12, and sharing what are they doing that's working, what are they doing that's not working, talking about what vendors they're using, all these things. But the secret sauce behind it all, you can get a lot better that way. But what puts you into hyperspeed in growth, into a hyper growth mode, is when you add data to the mix of that. And so, Mike, when we were in Detroit, he was like, Bill, we don't really like ask people to give 300 pieces of data. That's impossible, right? And I went back and looked at it. It's over 300. And so, Mike, if you're listening, it's over 300. Um, but the beauty of that, the secret of that is it takes away all the conjecture. It takes away the ego, which I know it's surprising to hear that there might be ego in our industry at all, but a lot of guys and a lot of money and a lot, all these things that form together to make us real proud of ourselves. But when you get into a room and you share your numbers with like-minded people about the same size, about the same stage, not afraid because they're usually market exclusive, and you go line by line, and they've all shared their data, and you're talking about not just 5 major data points, what's your profitability, what was your revenue, but what's your cost per case in every category of marketing that you're doing. And have you factored in that the cost per case that it takes you to get that case that signed up? Are you factoring in the amount of those cases, the percentage of those cases that drop off after 4 months or drop off after a year? And then you look back and say, oh, we thought our cost per case was amazing at $900 per sign up, but that particular source, half of those cases end up not being very good. We thought they were good, they look good, but we find out later that they're not very good. And now you realize, no, our cost per case was not 900, it's 1800. You don't get to that stuff unless you're digging down. And a lot of these metrics, a lot of these things that we look at, a lot of the firms have never heard of. They've never, and I call them second and third degree metrics. And when you start looking at those things and hearing other firms that are looking at them, how do we measure that? There's no room for ego. The data says it right there. And so you learn, and you learn who to listen to. You learn, wow, I want to spend some more time with that guy. They've got it figured out. You know, Chris Keller's got it figured out when it comes to marketing or case value, because the numbers show it, and then everybody benefits from it. So that's the power of a mastermind. That's what they are. And I'll say, if they're not looking at data, um, deep data, then it's about half as effective, as if you are looking at data. It's a major piece, a major piece.
Well, I know for me, enjoying the mastermind group that you lead, you know what they always say, and I think it was Peter Drucker, right, that said, what gets measured gets
Yep.
improved. But to take it a step further with what masterminds do, what gets measured and made public gets drastically improved, right? And so I know for me, having to be in a room and put my numbers up, and other people are going to see it, be able to judge it, you know, makes me work harder to improve those numbers. You know, I have to,
100%.
you know, one, I didn't know what some of those numbers were. So then I had to go out and figure out what those numbers were. And then two, once I learned them, I'm like, all right, well, this makes sense. Now I got to do the work to improve them. But, you know, masterminds really are for any industry and are so important. But let's talk about, you know, one thing I know you've done, you've been involved in a lot of different organizations. And so whether it's personal injury or not, you know, where should people really look to spend their time? Because we're constantly, I know in September alone, I was in Palm Beach for 6 days out of the month because I was at a bunch of different conferences.
Yeah.
And so, what do you look at to say this is where I'm going to spend my time, or this is where I'm going to go? What's the most valuable thing that people can do, whether they're growing a law firm or growing a business, on where they should spend their time? Because time is a resource, and we got to make sure that we are spending our time in valuable places.
100%. And look, there are a lot of law firms, um, that never reached their potential because their owner spent too much time at conferences. And you know, and look, we're fortunate. A lot of the conferences in our industry are fun. People like to go out. They like to have fun, see their friends, and all that. And look, if you're making a good living and you're happy where you are, um, maybe that's a perk of the lifestyle. It's a lifestyle perk. But um, I would say every not just PI. You mentioned it. It's not unique to this industry. In fact, we're usually, we don't set the trends. We usually are picking them up later. That's starting to change, but I think every PI law firm owner and COO and exec need to think very strategically about how much time they spend working in their business, doing the day to day. I like to call that the cake, right? Like you're doing the cake, you're working the cases, or you're working the marketing. Whatever your thing is, you're doing it. You're doing that work every day. But you also have to spend time. You have to set aside, and you can get consumed. A lot of really good lawyers and good executives can get consumed in the work, and they never take a step back to work on the business. So take a step back from working in it and working and take some time to work on it, and that's the icing, right? That to me, that's the thing that makes it better. Um, and so I think you strategically have to take a step back and say, when's the last time that I took a half day, a full day, whatever, and I thought about, and it's two things. It comes down to two things: fixing major problems and harnessing major opportunities. If you're not setting aside time to do those, then the work is going to become just a cycle of what's called the tyranny of the urgent. Whichever fire is burning the biggest, uh, the squeaky wheel idea, same thing. You'll just get consumed, especially in younger firms, so to speak, young entrepreneurs. The firm, it really doesn't matter about chronology, but or actual physical age. It's you can, as an entrepreneur, you can get sucked into the work of the business, and rather than working on it. And so I think you've got to be disciplined. And just for anybody who's like, how do I do that? Like, what's a good first step? I would say a great first step is to ask yourself the question: do you do any quarterly or annual planning of any kind? If you're not planning, if you're not setting an annual plan, setting annual goals, and then I would say doing that on a quarterly basis and revisiting them, and keeping tracking that data, making those goals non-ambiguous. Um, so I always, every goal I have, it's got to have a number attached to it, right? And there's an acronym called SMART goals, right? EOS, fireproof, and that's not the only system, but it's a great one, of track setting goals, and those goals are typically going to be fixing problems and harnessing opportunities to make the firm better, and also setting what I call critical number targets, which are the numbers we want to hit from the cake, from the how what we're doing every day, closing cases, signing up cases, all those things. But what if there's a better way to sign up cases? What if our conversion rate is awful, right? The industry standard is 92 and a half. What if we're at 84? And we finally started measuring that number. We say, how do we get up to this 92 and a half or 93 or 94%? What's wrong with us? You're going to have to take a step back. It's not just going to get better on its own. You got to take a step back and work on it. That happens. The easiest first step is to commit to doing annual and quarterly planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's switch to culture a little bit because you are. I know when I was on stage, I got lost listening to you because you had so much just amazing information. So to build a team of 125 people, how do you go about building a team? What's the secret sauce to building an amazing high performing team? I know you've said, you got to love your people, but you have to demand high performance.
Yeah.
So where does that come from? What does that mean for you in practice?
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. These same principles that I talk about now are really principles that became, enormously just interwoven with my identity, with who I am, when I was a pastor. And they apply in the same context. So when I say, to me, leadership boils down to, my leadership mantra is love your people, demand high performance. What do I mean by love? Because some people get freaked out by that, using that terminology, or they get awkward and squirmy with using that terminology. All that means, in the business context and the team context, is as often as you can, do what's best for that person. As often as you can, care about what that person cares about, right? And the reverse of that, by the way, when a team member does that, for leaders, it's love your people, demand high performance. When a team member looks and says, I want to care about the same things my boss cares about, that's an ownership mentality. They're no longer thinking like an employee, like a team member, they're thinking like an owner, right? And when those things happen, when you care about, and it starts with choosing the right people. That recruiting, which you talked a lot about that at that meeting or at that panel that we did. It was brilliant stuff, right on, phenomenal stuff. Choosing the right people that you can love, that you can get behind, that you can support because they've got the DNA you're looking for. And then that leads them to trust you. And especially in this climate, with the way work is viewed, and the generational issues that we have going on in the workplace, I almost think that you have to do it that way. You have to show them you care, give them a purpose, give them a cause, and you earn the right. And my belief is you earn the right then to coach hard, and to coach people to that high performance level. So ultimately, I think you do those two things, really three things: pick the right people, genuinely care about them, care about what's important to them, help them reach their potential where they want to be. Good people love that. And then you coach them. You earn the right to coach them hard, and that helps them grow. That helps the firm grow, and it it it, it it's pretty magical, and it's a
And
whole lot of fun.
I know you
and
talked about a culture that just happens versus a culture that is designed. And I know for too long I was a part of a culture that just happened. And then when I started my own firm, again, I didn't know anything about design culture or what that
yeah,
even meant. So again, it was just a culture that happened. So what do you mean by a culture that just happens and a culture that is designed? And then how do people kind of go about intentionally designing their culture?
yeah, I love it, man. You did your homework because you're asking me all my favorite questions. Um, um, yeah, I think what you said is right on. The implication of what you said, there is no such thing as a team or a firm that does not have a culture, right? Every organization has a culture. Every relationship has a culture. Every family has a culture. Every group of people has a culture. And so it's either going to be something that just happens as a result of your behaviors and your values, how they're expressed, the leader as the leader or the leaders, or you can take a step back and say, all right, is this something that we can harness? Is this something that we can design? The answer is yes. And have it become, and here's why it's like, here's the practicality of why culture becomes so important. And I'm going to combine that other ambiguous buzzword that should be defined better, core values. Those things all put together, and they're deeply connected. Here's why they're so important. They become the guiding principle, the compass, the waypoint for how you make decisions. That's it. How you make decisions about the business, how you make decisions about how you hire, how you make decisions about who you hire, how you make decisions about how you treat the client, about how you handle a case. Are you aggressive enough? Are you not? Those factors that you say, this is what is deeply important to us, those are your core values. You put those together and say, all right, how do these apply to this whole structure, to this whole organization that we're creating? That turns into your culture, and that becomes the framework by which every one of your decisions is measured. It's a litmus test. And so when you have that in place, then you start to say, all right, once we have that, now we hold up every decision we make, big decisions, little decisions. Are they in alignment with our culture? Are they in alignment with our values? And when you have that, now you're streamlined, and you can fly, and people can trust what's about to happen, what has happened. Right, they're in a those good people that we were talking about. Now they know what to expect. They know that you have said from the beginning, we are aggressive in on cases. Like, we don't undersettle. Okay, just take as an example that aggression is one of your core values that you want integrally a part of your culture. So they know we're going to fight. And so then when you say, all right, we're going to start valuing our cases, we're going to have our best lawyers or a team of lawyers or whoever, we're going to value each case or value the biggest cases. Well, that is an outgrowth of a value that you have put into your culture that says we're going to be aggressive on behalf of our clients. And it becomes not only this big thing, but something that is interwoven in every single decision you make. And that's pretty powerful. It brings alignment, it brings focus. So a lot of people that think that stuff is soft skills and soft science, it's not. It's extremely intricate and powerful and extraordinarily practical if you really know what it's about.
For those young, for those entrepreneurs and young or old, it doesn't matter for someone who's starting now or maybe someone who's been doing it for a long time, but doesn't have that culture or never really thought about it that way. Kind of where's the easiest place to start or to get started on really designing that culture?
Yeah. So, you know, I won't go into the long story about it. I think you know it. But I did when I was asked to give a talk. When people started talking about me as the culture guy, when that brand kind of started to develop it took on a life of its own. But I loved it because they were right. Like, this stuff is critically important to me. So then I was asked to give a talk at a very in a very prominent, large conference, and a lot of important, a lot of big players in the industry there. And they asked me, this organization asked me, um, we want you to give a talk on culture, but on how it will increase your ROI. Like, how take it and make it tangible so that people can understand how it fits into their business. Because, Bill, by the way, you know, a lot of folks like to make money. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So that put me on a path of studying, of researching what is culture, because it was so ambiguous, and it's in a lot of places it still is. So I looked at sociology, anthropology, and I learned, I researched, I read what people who study culture for a living, um, what the experts say. Then I applied it to business, and amazingly, the overlap was incredibly aligned. So, in practical speaking, where to get started? Three simple things. If you want to build culture, start with these three things. What do you believe about your client? What do you believe about your team, each other? And what do you believe about the purpose of the work you do? So if you're the leader, if you're starting a firm, or even if you got a firm of 300 and you've never even thought about this stuff, and you're like, but it's chaos, I need to bring this, I need to get this, some railings, some guidelines. What's important to us? All right. The three things it's always going to come down to in our industry, and I think this crosses over other industries, but for sure in PI, is what do you believe about the client? What do you believe about each other? And what do you believe about the purpose? And I call it, I'm continuing to do research. Maybe there's a book out there somewhere at some point. Um, I call it the saturation of belief. So, in other words, how deeply does we got 64 paralegals? How deeply do each of them truly believe in the value of our client and how important our clients are? Do they know what we expect from them in terms of how they talk to the client, how often they talk to the client, how we view the client? Do Have we set rules and guidelines that are a manifestation of our values about what we believe about the client? So if you have these ideals about what you believe about the client, then you measure each of the people in your organization, and I call that measurement the saturation of what I'm measuring is the saturation of belief. So if you got somebody who's, they score 92 out of 100 in terms of how they think and function related to clients, that person has a high saturation of this value of one of these three primary values of culture, or pillars, we might say. Then you do it. How do they function with other people on their team? How do they do? Are they a gossip? Are they constantly in drama? Are they cantankerous? Are they easy to get along with? Hard to get? Do they cheer for their team members? Are they undercut their team members? Right? How much do they believe in each other? Right? Let's measure that. And there's ways to measure that. And then finally, the purpose, right? The same thing. And by the way, purpose and client, although they're very tied, it's not the same thing. Um, but of the three, the hardest one to get right in almost every organization, most people think it's focused on the client. Getting that level of saturation up, it's actually the second one, getting people to get along. That is the one that probably undercuts and sabotages more firms than anything. It slows them down and breaks them down because they can't function with one another well. But
You
it's those
talked
three
about
things.
you talked about becoming known as the culture guy and being asked to speak at a in that room. And so, kind of want to talk about your journey and how you got to this point. I mean, is this something you saw coming, never saw coming, you worked towards, didn't see, but kind of take people through that journey for you and how it's evolved in such a way that you are having such a powerful impact and really reshaping the industry, inspiring law firm members like myself to really do better. So kind of take us through how you got to this point, this journey, and making the impact that you're
Yeah,
making.
yeah. I I really I want to pull it down from the ethereal or the ambiguous. because so much of the time that's where people spend. You end up there when you talk a lot about culture and core values and things like that. I think this happened. I don't believe in, well, I personally believe that there's purpose to life. And so, and to me, the alternative is ghastly to think, I have, there's no purpose to why we're here. So I start thinking about, all right, what's my purpose? And then for years, I used to be, because I played sports and still very competitive. And so I used to think that hitting goals is where the satisfaction came from, right? So if I could get our firm to 10 million, then man, now I've arrived. Or you make a certain amount of money for your family. Now I've arrived. And what I found was every time I hit a goal, it was exciting. And then for about a day, before the end of that day, I was already thinking about what was next. And I realized hitting goals is at its core is not the satisfying thing. And so then I had to again go in like, all right, what is it then? Because I don't want to just live this life in the hamster wheel of hitting goals and then being discontent with those goals when I hit them. And I realized, okay, how do I define success then for me? Um, and for me, it was live up to every ounce and drop of potential I've got. So whatever giftings I have, whatever opportunities, whatever moments of influence or situations that I'm in, my standard for my own personal success is, am I living out my purpose, and am I living up to my potential? And so um, I was fortunate enough to help write the eulogy for Muhammad Ali. That happened as a part of my past life before I got into law firms. And I still do a little bit of speech writing for athletes and things like that. And so there was an athlete that I worked with that gave one of three eulogies for Muhammad Ali. And one of the things in the research for that eulogy we found was that Ali, um, and this guy, my client, knew him obviously very, very well. And in talking to his family and figuring out what it was that drove him, it wasn't winning and losing. Did he want to win? Of course. Right. I mean, he was highly driven. But what was most painful for him was not being able to get in the ring, not being able to compete when his body get, and all the trauma that he went through, and just age catches up with every one of us. So what was it that he was really about? It was, I want to be able to compete. I want to get in the ring. Right. And there's that saying, the man in the arena. Right. That's that. And what it's doing the thing we're made to do. And so how can you ever measure, what's the numerical value? And as much as I'm about goals in your law firm and setting goals and numerics and all that thing, at the deepest personal level, I don't know if there's a number attached to it other than maybe, 98% of your life live up to your potential. But that's how all this has developed for me. So is it a surprise? Yes. But then at other times I look back and I say, I can see how this developed. It's not, um, it at times it feels crazy, and I feel like the most blessed, um, um, what do they call it? The imposter syndrome. Right? What am I doing here? How did this happen to me? And then at other times I'm like, no, it's just about do what you're meant to do, keep doing it. And when you fail and you suck at it, work harder, learn, keep a healthy image of or healthy view of yourself, be self-analytical, be honest with yourself about you, and then go out and live out your giftings and your potential. Stick to your purpose. And if you do that the rest of your life, as many days as you can, um, I think that's how I would define success and reaching the highest goals of your life.
Obviously, a lot about my journey in these last 2 years have been so transformative for me. And one of the biggest reasons was I started waking up early. I adopted a really strong morning routine, got myself healthy. And once I became healthy, as kind of started achieving my level 10 self in both physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well being. Uh, really allowed me to become a better leader, show up better for my firm, show up better for my wife, show up better for my kids. And I look at you as someone who has this endless energy. Like you just got off a plane and jump on a podcast recording. You and I were at a meeting where you gave me 3 hours of your time at dinner and just, really got into all this. And so, I've got to ask, where do you get that boundless energy that you have to be able to just give so much of yourself to so many people?
And honestly, I don't think I'm very good at it. I was 3 minutes late to our podcast meeting here, and um, I you know, there are a lot of pieces of that I still don't think I do very well, and I also have a problem thinking that I'm lazy, because I like a good nap. There's no doubt about it, man. And like you wake it like I've done triathlons, and kudos to anybody who doesn't realize Chris Keller is an Iron Man. That look if people knew what it takes to run and to complete an Ironman triathlon, it's months and months of consistent discipline and training. So do I don't think I have boundless energy. I think I'm energized by things I love. I'm energized by success. I am energized by guilt and shame sometimes, which isn't really the healthiest thing. But um, yeah, those moments you might think, yeah, where does he get that energy? Well, it's because he's in about 32 minutes going to be in, zonked out. Um, but I'm glad I'm upholding that image. Um, I will say though, it is something does seem to happen when you're in your flow, but like when you're doing the stuff that you're good at, you feel called to, you feel purpose. Um, like asking these questions, you can tell, man, you're skillfully pulling this stuff out of me because I love it, and I've spent a lot of time on this stuff. I'm a nerd, a geek about these things. Um, I will say though, there's something to be said, and this is something that I admire you and anyone else who has the discipline to take care of themselves physically the way you're doing right now. I've had place times in life that I've done it, but not consistent. I've got to have some kind of goal, like a triathlon or something like that, and that type of discipline, the payoff in your personal life and in your business life of just being healthy, physically healthy. People don't think about it, right, when they're in their 20s, 30s, and probably even into their 40s. But when you start to slow down because you're old or you're fat or you start to realize, man, I'm not giving as much as I could, and it's because I eat like crap and I don't hit the gym. So kudos to you, and that is a key beyond a shadow of a doubt is being healthy physically.
Well, one thing you talked about was consistency and discipline and doing that, and that's what I found from doing these sports, doing triathlons. You do have to be consistent. You have to be disciplined. You have to show up when, it's cold out or it's wet or
Mm-hmm.
even when you don't want to, when the motivation lacks. Motivation is going to wane a lot, and so discipline's what's going to carry you through. But the
That's right.
same is so true in your journey of business. Once I started showing up consistently, once I started putting in the work and being disciplined about putting in the work, like knowing the numbers, knowing the data, that's where things started coming together for me in a big way. And so if you can leave those who are just starting out or those who've been doing it for a long time with the piece of advice or the wisdom that you've learned over so many years of your career, what is that piece of advice that you give?
Mm-hmm. Take the time to figure out um, what your purpose is. Figure out if you believe that you've got one, and then when you chew on that for a while, you probably will come to the conclusion it'll eat away, it'll chew back, and you'll start to realize, yeah, I don't want to live a purposeless life. And so take the time to look inside and figure out what your purpose in life is. Um, take the time to learn your strengths and weaknesses, a lot of introspection, get opinions of other people. And then if it's business, if it's building a business, building a firm, then when you understand yourself well, or other people force you to understand you well because they keep telling you what a jerk you are when in a certain, or how bad you suck at a certain thing, and let them have it. It Once you realize who you are, then fill in around you people that are smarter and better and stronger and that share your values and share and are aligned with you. Empower them, love them, and demand high performance of them. Um, and never be a victim. Never be a victim to any circumstance. Never, never accept that you're a victim in this world, because you're the only one that can do something about it. And if you do that, which is a lot of internal work, I think it's hard to fail. If you do that work, deep introspection, purpose, strengths and weaknesses, your potential, your giftings, gather people around you, and then refuse to ever be a victim, it's almost impossible to fail at life if you put those
Such
things in
powerful words,
place.
Bill. Thank you so much for your time and joining me on First Light. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks out in Arizona. But for those who want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
You know, probably LinkedIn. That's probably, I mean, look, Bill Biggs, look me up on LinkedIn, Fireproof, GGL. You'll find me. Um, I've said enough dumb things that there's a lot of it on the internet. And so you just look me up and you'll find me.
Oh,
And call, text, call, reach out. I love hearing from folks.
all right. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you a lot, man.
Hey, man, looking forward to seeing you in Arizona.
Yeah, we're gonna have a
And then
blast.
I think the next time I'll see you, if there's nothing something before, is in Arizona again for the masterminds, right? I think we're doing
Yeah,
the
it's actually right
masterminds and
before. I think it's right before Business of Law.
oh, well,
Um,
so my group, the Champions group, is not till February, but we're in
oh, that's right.
Scottsdale.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the Legends group. Um, so yeah, yeah, we'll do November in Arizona and then hit again in February. But I tell you what, when you come out, sometime between now and Business of Law, I want to look and see how they kind of framed our talk, what they put it out there as, and we should try to come up with something that people haven't heard,
Yeah.
not make stuff up, but take these same principles and and mix the ingredients in a different way and do something that um, you know intrigues them,
I was gonna say, I
catches
think
them.
they labeled the panel the same as the Fireproof Public Summit. I think, but I'm not positive. But it looked to me very similar. So,
Yeah, they may want that same exact thing. That's usually Mike and Ashley that are looking at
yeah,
those things, and we got good response from that. But I always say, man, when it comes to public speaking and things like that, one of two things has to change, or it's going to go bad eventually. Either the content that you're sharing or the audience that you're sharing it to. And so, uh, at this point, I get a little concerned about saying the same things over and over again, unless the audience has changed.
yeah. Well, one thing I told Mike about that up in Detroit is um, I said, the hardest, the thing about the content is that some people need to hear it multiple times, number
Yeah,
one, before it makes sense.
it's
And
true.
sometimes when we hear it, we're not ready for it.
Yeah,
Right. So there's certain points in time in business where I hear a certain idea and I'm like, that's awesome. But where I'm at in my journey, I'm not ready for it yet. And so the next time I come, I hear it again. Maybe I'm still not ready. And then the next time I come, I hear it. I was like, I've heard all this. This makes sense. And now I'm at the point where it's time to go. So I tell him like I don't worry about it so much as long as there's other value add.
yeah,
If I'm going to the same conference and hearing the same thing over and over again, at some point maybe it's not. But there's so much other value add in Fireproof just through the community now with masterminds. Like the Ford Museum, the Wrigley Museum, all the different things that they do to kind of just give it an experience feel to it too makes a big difference as well. So, I've heard John Knockings will talk about compensation. I don't know how many times now,
yep,
but when I first heard it the first couple of times, I wasn't ready to put a pod profit model in place, right?
uh huh,
And so it took a few times of hearing it to say, okay, now I'm ready to do this. So I don't worry about it a whole lot, but as long as there's, again, other value adds, I don't want to go to the same conference, hit the same thing over and over and over again. But Fireproof's done a good job about, just uh, adding some new stuff. Like we were out in or out in Arizona. They talked about the ABSs, the
Yeah,
tech panels with AI, bringing in vendors. That's been helpful, and good vendors. They've done a real good job with it, man. It's great.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. I still think, even before I was involved and connected with Fireproof, I thought the business of law was probably one of the, in a sea of conferences, I thought it was one of the probably top five, top three or top five conferences that had both, you had fun, there was neat stuff going on, nice place, nice hotel, all that, but the substance, you know, there was meat on the bone,
Yeah,
and if you took what you heard and actually implemented it, that you would have a much better firm. And you can't say that about every conference for sure.
yeah. That's why I
So,
didn't want to pass on it. I mean, I was like, I was gone the whole month of September. I spoke at a couple conferences, and so I was going to take off, between now and the Ironman, just to, I just didn't want to, didn't want to mess with training. Number one, and two, my wife was like, "Hey, you haven't been home a lot," so I was going to take some time off. But then all of a sudden, business law popped up, and I was like, "Well, I don't want to miss that opportunity to be able to speak there because it is a great conference and a great location, and I want to be asked again." So I was like, "I'm not going to pass. I'm going." So we'll be there.
yep, I think it's good.
Thank you for doing this so much. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bill, thank you for joining me on First Light. Your story and your leadership philosophy are reminders that success isn't just about systems or results, it's about people, culture, and legacy. Thank you for tuning in to First Light. And remember, keep shining your light.